Hey everyone, and welcome to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about She-Hulk Attorney at Law, Episode 1. It is called A Normal Amount of Rage. So I will start spoiler free because it's in Episode 1. This ranked highest on the Patreon pilot priority list. So here I am to review it. As the new Marvel Cinematic Universe show or miniseries. I don't know if this is one that's going to be up for multiple seasons or if it's one and done and then she'll be in movies or whatever. But this is a 9-episode season, so a little bit different to some of the others. I think this was the same length as WandaVision, if I remember correctly. Although most of them have been 6. And this is She-Hulk. This is based on Bruce Banner's cousin, who also gets Hulk-like abilities. And she's also a lawyer, which makes her a little bit different from Bruce. And yeah, I'll give some spoiler-free thoughts and explain kind of the premise of the show. And then I'll maybe go into some spoiler stuff towards the end. So without further ado, this is a very interesting first episode, which has a little bit of an asterisk on it that I felt whilst I was watching it, and then after I watched the episode, I just did a little bit of reading on it and found out or confirmed a feeling that I had. And it wasn't so much that I suspected that they had changed anything, but it was more just it felt like this episode has a framing device which is very small, but most of the episode is okay, let's flashback to how she got the Hulk powers and time she spent with Bruce training and learning how to control her powers, right? That's what most of this episode is. And when it started up and you get this little lead in where she's working as a lawyer and she's preparing to make her final argument and her final statement in this trial, she breaks the fourth wall and starts talking to the audience and says, hey, you probably won't want to focus on this lawyer stuff until you know about the Hulk thing I just mentioned, right? Well, here you go. A few months ago I was doing this, and it do. It goes back and we get the backstory. Minor nitpick on just how it transitions is she says in the narration, a few months ago I was with my cousin Bruce, and it still comes up on the screen saying a few months ago. It's a really minor nitpick, but we don't need both. Like, either, say it or show it. One or the other is fine. And if you're someone who's hearing impaired, that's okay. It'll be in the subtitles that you turn on anyway, because it's part of the, it'll be subtitled with everything else. So you don't really need to show it on screen as a big caption as well. Anyway, but so very quickly, something happens that gives her powers and leads into the training and just a bit of character building and all that stuff. And I had this weird feeling as I was watching it that felt like this wasn't supposed to be the first episode. It felt like the sort of flashback to an origin story you do later on. Now, I didn't think it was as late as it was going, or as it originally was. When I did read up afterwards and found out that most of this episode was actually going to be episode 8, the penultimate episode of the season. I assume the parts that weren't were the opening and closing, which maybe they reshot to fit with this being the first episode, or maybe they repurposed some of it from elsewhere. I'm not sure, but the order changed in post-production. But I did get that feeling. It kind of felt like this was meant to be episode 2 or 3, introduces to her life right now and then go back and show how she became what she is. It had that feeling to it. It kind of felt like we were already supposed to know her to a certain extent during these scenes, and I got that impression. So it felt a little bit weird as a first episode, even though it is the origin, and you would think the origin would make sense as a first episode. If it was written that way, it would, but it felt like, no, we were supposed to get a little bit of a first. Turns out we're meant to get most of the season first, but I thought it was going to just be a little bit. And then it was going to flash back to this. Maybe even not in one big bit. Maybe in cut up flashbacks that it would sort of do throughout the episode. Because that's the other thing, is this episode is very short. I think the full runtime is 37 minutes, but there's 6 minutes of there's 6 minutes of credits at the end. Most of these Disney Plus shows have a very lengthy credits. Because they'll do the sort of stylized opening title style thing at the end. There's a mid-credit scene in this case. And then you'll get the rest of the credits, which are another few minutes. And that means that the actual episode is at most 32 minutes. Once you've cut that stuff off, and normally I wouldn't bother even like saying take off the credit runtime, because not normally in TV shows it's irrelevant. It's a minute or two. It's not a big deal. You don't have to think about it. But with these Disney Plus shows, it does feel like a considerable amount of that runtime that you see on the menu. It says 37 minutes, and immediately I actually thought it was only going to be 30. It did get to about 32, I think, by the time it actually finished. So they've tightened up a little bit, I suppose. So that is maybe the main critique I would give it. Is that one, it feels a little off because it is from a later episode, and it kind of feels like it's been pulled forward from something, despite the fact that it is the origin. And as a result of that, a lot of it feels kind of rushed. Like the thing that ends up getting her powers is so quick. Whereas I feel like had this actually taken place later, the thing that gives her powers, which I don't even think is a spoiler to say, like, they're driving together. Her and Bruce are driving together, and an alien ship comes down and like fires at them, which makes the car crash, and then events unfold from there. It just feels so sudden and random the way it's presented in this episode, and I have to assume that it's going to tie into like other things going on in the season, and that it probably wouldn't have felt so random if some of the other stuff had already been introduced as it would have been originally in the main plot going forward in the show. In this, it feels super abrupt and just, well, that's suddenly, oh, now she has... I think if this came later, it wouldn't matter that it was so quick, but because we get this one little book end at the start, and then it goes straight into this car drive, which within a couple of minutes, after a little bit of banter, immediately they're just randomly attacked, and it feels weird and abrupt. So you've got that problem, and then you've got the problem that I've had with a lot of these Disney Plus shows, not just the Marvel ones, but all of them pretty much. With one or two exceptions, is that they feel super short and not enough of a chunk in an episode. I'll reserve judgment because of the weird way they swap things around here as to how it feels episode to episode. I complimented Miss Marvel for actually feeling like a TV show and not just a movie that was like stretched out and cut up, which I felt with most Disney Plus shows up until now. It's hard to judge with this one based on this first episode. It's actually very hard to judge what this is episode to episode, because this is clearly an outlier. This is clearly a very different type of episode. You get a sense of like the guy she works with and her best friend that she works with. At least I think that's her best friend. I'm not sure. But from this episode, you don't get much. You don't get much of any of that. It's all her and Bruce, and I feel like that's probably not very representative of the rest of the season, I imagine. I don't know how much the rest of this season that Bruce is actually going to be in. It felt like most of the stuff that was from the trailer that had Hulk or Bruce in it was in this episode, and I don't remember it that well, but all the big funny moments in the trailer were in this episode. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting asterisk on this first episode, is that it wasn't meant, for the most part, it wasn't meant to be the first episode, and it did feel a little off because of that. The positives I have, though, for the episode, are basically kind of similar to Miss Marvel, actually, is that they got a great lead actor. Tatiana Maslany is great. I saw season 1 of Orphan Black a while ago, and I kind of fell away from it for whatever reason. It's kind of just, eternally on that I'll get to watching the whole thing at some point. But what's interesting about that is that she actually played multiple characters on that show because it was about clones. That was kind of the premise of the show. But inherently, I don't remember any of them being as light and witty as this Jen is. Jen Walters, that's her name, and I've never read a She-Hulk comic. I've read comics where She-Hulk's popped in. I've read like an Avengers book where She-Hulk's like on the team, or she shows up for a little bit. But I've never read an actual She-Hulk comic, so I don't really have much knowledge on her. I knew she was a lawyer. I knew she was Bruce Banner's cousin. I knew that she wasn't typically portrayed as like a dumb Hulk, the way Bruce Banner's Hulk normally is, or like an angry Hulk. I think traditionally she is presented as, she's still herself when she's in Hulk form, and that's something this episode kind of touches on, of course, as it goes. So yeah, she's very good. She's witty. She's got a lot of humor to deal with, which is not surprising. But that's kind of a staple of the Marvel stuff at this point. for better or worse, they have a particular quota of humor they like to include. At least in this case, this does feel like it's skewing more comedic in the sense that, you know, you've got the fourth wall breaking stuff, and that inherently just kind of sets it a little bit apart. Obviously, there's a comparison to make with Deadpool in that sense. It's not as frequent as that, though. There's not a lot of it. It's just occasionally there'll be a little look at the camera and a little line, kind of thing. But I think the best thing I would say about her is that she feels very natural when she's having to make big speeches about her life, and she's sort of hitting on the more, the social commentary or whatever. Like when she's giving speeches that has to hit on the difference between her and Bruce, and how like a lot of the things she goes through day to day that make her angry or scared, and how it's different from Bruce because she's a woman. She does a really good job delivering those speeches, and it comes off very natural, and I appreciate that, because I think they should focus on that stuff, because it should make her stand out from Bruce's Hulk. I love Hulk as a character. I actually, he's one of my more favorite end of the Marvel characters on my scale. So not knowing much about She-Hulk, I think they should focus on the differences that she brings to the table, because we've had a lot of Hulk in various things. So yeah, that's good. The humor itself is kind of, hit and miss. Some things made me laugh, some things didn't, and that kind of goes for the references to the greater MCU as well. At this point, I'm pretty desensitized to the whole MCU shared universe thing, and I think for every reference that feels like it makes sense and makes the world feel fuller and more connected in a good way, there's a reference that feels like, oh, you've got a quota of references you need to get into like every episode or movie, and some of them feel a little bit, forced or whatever. It's like we have to have a certain quota of like references to other Avengers characters, or quiet moments that reference a sad part from one of the movies or something. And some of them obviously work, and some of them are justified, and some of them are kind of funny or whatever. But much like the humor, it's kind of, I'd say about 50-50 with me. I think what's so funny is that this episode does feel like it's rushing something, and I think it's because it is mostly just this big flashback, so you don't really get to feel a real sense, because it was clearly written to be a flashback once a lot of the story had played out. To just go back to this for a second, it has this kind of weird feeling of, how do I put this? So typically when you do the origin later, right, you do a flashback to explain the backstory of something later, you don't tend to do it as a straight story that has its own like A to B arc, right? Typically when you do flashbacks later to explain an origin, you do more of a bullet point kind of thing, or like a highlights of it kind of thing, to make it snappier. And that's one of the benefits of doing that way. You don't have to kind of linger on things too much. But when you present it as the actual origin at the start of the show, and you're going sequentially, other than the bookends, which is not really, changing anything, is you do it in a more kind of traditional, straightforward manner. And because it is clearly written as something from later that is now being inserted back into the start, a lot of it does kind of feel abrupt and rushed. I mentioned the start feeling like that, but I'm elaborating on it a little bit more, because I do think it kind of is lingering there, and I really noticed it before I knew that happened. It had a different feel, and I felt relieved when I saw that afterwards, because I knew I wasn't just being crazy. Because I've not been super hot in Marvel stuff, people tend to think I'm going to go in with a bad attitude, or look for things to complain about, or whatever. I felt so relieved when I actually saw that I wasn't just imagining something, that there was I don't think everyone's going to notice it, right? I don't, but I think a lot of people are going to. But anyway, yeah, so she's good. One of the things that I thought was bad about the trailer was the CG. I would say the CG seems to be a bit better in the final show. Not perfect by any means, and there's definitely still some weird moments of Uncanny Valley, either in the faces or I notice it a lot in movement. When CG characters move around, there's something kind of unnatural about it. But luckily, Maslany's performance is fairly charming, and when she's doing the She-Hulk, you kind of just get into the performance, and the CG is not as big a deal once you get into it. And that was always going to be the case, really, but it's reassuring to kind of feel that in this first episode. I will say, I'm looking at the IMDb page for this first episode, and it's sitting at a 4.3. I can't help but note that is probably a simple case of review bombing, because that is absurdly low, regardless of feelings. That is like a disaster almost of an episode, and it is definitely not a disaster. It's a little bit quirky because of the reorganization of the episodes, and feels maybe a little I wouldn't say chopped up, but you can kind of get a feeling that things changed at some point, and it feels a little off because of that. Sadly, this is something that's become kind of consistent with any superhero, or even like something like a Star Wars maybe, but certainly any superhero thing that focuses on a female character. You get review bombs, you get angry man babies on the internet trying to just bomb it with 1-star reviews and things like that to try and give it a shit rating. Sometimes it's not, if it's female focused, it'll be because it's focused on black characters or someone of color. I remember seeing it a lot with the DC CW shows where miraculously Black Lightning would be really underrated on IMDb. Alternatively, the other ones were vastly overrated. But sadly, like you kind of like, just with certain movies and shows now, you look at an IMDb rating and you just know that you can't take that one seriously, sadly. It's a sad thing we have to sort of deal with now, but it's the sort of thing where this has not only a female lead character, but she is actively calling out, harassment, she's calling out being catcalled, she's calling out different things. It is the sort of thing that a certain portion of the audience are going to be just pissed off and angry and act like a bunch of crybabies because the show is getting quote-unquote too political. So, at this point, I don't even know what to say about that sort of stuff anymore. Not the political stuff itself. I welcome it in shows because art should say something. It should be about something. You can be heavy-handed, you can be ham-fisted with it, and it can maybe feel a bit shoehorned in. I don't actually think it does in this at all, which is why I'm bringing this up, is that there's not even something to complain about. Like, I have some nitpicks with the episode. I have some things, some concerns moving forward for how it'll feel as a show episode to episode, which is very hard to judge in this first one because it's clearly so different from the rest of it. But one of my critiques is not any time it brings up any type of sexism like analysis or commentary. Like I'm not like that is not an issue in this episode. In fact, it's strengthened by bringing up such a thing. Because when she says some of this stuff to Bruce, right, when he's trying to teach her about how to control her anger and fear, and she describes how she has to control her anger and fear on a daily basis, he doesn't really have a good answer for her. He's kind of like it looks like he's searching for the words because he's been kind of bamboozled a little bit, and he can't offer like a comparative thing to him. And that's interesting. And like if nothing else, like using She-Hulk versus regular Hulk is an exploration of how men and women are allowed to a certain extent to be angry versus not being angry in certain situations. The example she gives in the episode, of course, is that if she's talked down to, or someone explains like her own expertise to her, she says she has to just kind of grin and bear it, because if she does argue it, if she does make a fuss about it, she'll be called unprofessional or emotional and a lot of other things that are kind of these stereotypes. Stereotypes not even the word. These convention and I don't know, these sexist reactions, I guess I'll just call it. But I think pointing that stuff out and actually saying something and using these different Hulks as a method of talking about it, because Hulk, if nothing else, is about anger, right? It's always been about Bruce, and there's nothing wrong with dealing with Hulk as a character, and looking at the male side of anger, looking at what makes men angry, and how to try and improve upon that and be better is a very valid thing to look at. It's why Hulk's such an interesting character and why he works. But it's equally valid, and the reason why She-Hulk should exist versus regular Hulk is to look at how a woman has to control her fears and angers and things like that. The first time she hulks out in this episode, well, not the first time, but the first time after the initial accident, is in a very sort of traditional kind of moment where she feels threatened because some men are refusing to sort of let her go when they're trying to flirt with her, essentially. So, like, that's one of its strengths. And I felt it important to kind of like bring this up because the shitty part of the internet, which just wants to shit in anything that isn't just a straight white dude, and anything else is being too political. The existence of anyone else that isn't a straight white dude is being too political, and that's just bullshit. So, yeah. As for how I feel about the show after this first episode, like I say, it's hard to judge. It's hard to judge what this show is after this first episode. So I guess in that sense, it is a flawed first episode, and you can feel the tinkering to the overall show through this being sort of shoehorned in as the first one, barring maybe these new bookends. And it has a kind of unnatural pacing to it because it was originally designed as this flashback. But I do like the lead star, and some of it is kind of charming. There's a kind of amusing mid-credit scene if you want to stick around for that. It's not an important mid-credit scene, but it's amusing. So I guess I'll just give a main spoiler warning here so I can talk about anything else in the episode that I may want to bring up. I would probably start with, there's a big fight scene at the end, and this is one of the other things that felt a little bit rushed to an extent. I really wonder how this would have happened, because clearly, originally, when most of this episode was going to be episode 8, the world was going to discover that Jen was a Hulk, because so much of the plot, and even just from the trailer, is that they know, and they're going to like sort of ask her to deal with certain cases because she's technically a superhero now. In this first episode, after in the last part of the bookend, she's in court about to give her final statement on this case, and immediately this villain crashes through the wall, and she ends up hulking out and fighting, and this is one of the most rushed things about the episode, is that just how quickly she's exposed when she's been bragging that she's went a few months without ever hulking. Ever since she left Bruce at the beach, she's not hulked since. And immediately she's forced into a position where all it takes is a bit of light prodding and she's hulking out. Like, I get that there's people in danger, but you kind of really have to hammer that home a little bit more. Like, have someone almost about to be hurt. Like, have the villain going towards someone innocent looking, maybe an older person. Probably not a kid, because there wouldn't really be a kid in the courtroom in this context. But maybe someone who's a bit more vulnerable, and have that be the moment where Jessica, even though she doesn't want to reveal this about herself, she won't let someone be hurt. Instead, it's just a friend going, hey, go on, Hulk out, go on, Hulk out, Jen, go on, it's time to save everyone. And she just kind of reluctantly, does it. It feels like a bit of a non-moment when it should feel like the big moment for a character to make this choice, this very brave and risky choice to reveal herself to everyone in the room, and therefore, shedding the secrecy. As it's presented at the end of this episode, it feels very just kind of, there it is, it was done, this guy. And I feel that's probably because it happened a different way, maybe, or I mean, maybe some of this scene still existed in some form originally when it was episode 1, but they've had to cut it up, and the fight did feel a little bit maybe cut up as well. And I don't know if that's because they were mixing some new bits of dialogue and stuff around a fight that would have, because I assume, well, maybe this fight may have always taken place in episode 1, but because we didn't get a lot of time with lawyer Jen in this part of the timeline before all this goes down at the end, it just kind of feels like there's no context for it or whatever. So it's there's just, again, this reshuffling of the episode kind of had some impact on how certain moments in it work, and I don't know how much of this was redone in particular, or if this was how it was at the end of episode 1 always. It might have worked better with whatever the rest of episode 1 originally was. But hey, it is what it is. As you know, I don't really have too much to say about the Hulk training stuff. I mean, her and Bruce have reasonable chemistry. You get the impression that he is happy to get to like train someone and share what he's went through with someone, and she's determined to go back to her life constantly. And he's constantly upset that she's doing everything better than he did when he was learning. That she doesn't have an alternate ego. She doesn't have this angry persona she has to deal with. That she's already good at certain things, and it shows some differences in physical abilities. Where he does the Hulk clap at one point and sends her knocking back. Hers isn't as strong, but she does it quicker, and it kind of creates like a series of sound waves that start to like have an effect on him. So it's kind of like setting up some of the differences. There's some comedy here or there. He does the punch thing that he does to that he did to Thor in the first Avengers. He does that to her at one point when she kind of shows him up, and as she goes off the cliff, she gives him the finger, and there's bits of humor. It's it's the reasonable fun stuff. It's reasonable fun stuff. It just kind of feels weirdly isolated as a first episode, with without really properly introducing the rest of her character and world. So yeah, the only thing I would say is that Hulk, or I should say Bruce, he did come across a little bit controlling towards the end of this when she's trying to drive away and he's refusing to let her, which leads to the actual proper fight part of the episode. Because up until then, it's all just training stuff that they're doing together. He came across a little bit controlling at that point, which was a shame. But it felt I wouldn't say it felt like a character per se, but it kind of felt like, oh, you're kind of being a dick now. Like, she's clearly shown enough at this point. And he keeps saying, oh, you're going to be a superhero now. Even if you still want to be a lawyer, you're still going to be a superhero, even though she keeps saying she's not. And obviously, yeah, she's going to be, because that's like the show, right? She's a comic book character. It's just how it's going to work. But yeah, so so I know that the villain that pops up at the end, she's played by Jamil, who was on The Good Place, and I think she's the main villain of the show, or one of the main villains at least. So we'll see what comes of that, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, my issue with reviewing these Marvel shows week to week with past shows is typically that once after you've settled in and you sort of know what it is, I've struggled to have that much to say about some of the later episodes. So I don't want to make any promises about covering every episode of this. With Miss Marvel, I just watched the rest and came back and talked about the wait, did I do a season review of that? I can't remember now. I think I planned to. I don't know if I ever actually got around to doing it. Yeah, because Miss Marvel was a really crushing series, and I really liked the first 2 episodes, and then 3, 4, and 5, I really hated might be a strong word, but I was pretty close to hate. And then episode 6 kind of reined it back into what I liked a little bit. But obviously at that point you've kind of like botched half the season, so it kind of felt a bit sad at the end of the show. I think there's potential in this. I really do. I do wonder though if it's going to all be 30 something minute episodes for the rest of the season, because it's not a satisfying enough chunk of episode for something that's not a sitcom. It just doesn't feel satisfying. And don't get me wrong, I don't want it to be artificially extended for the sake of it. But it almost feels like they're milking episodes out of what their story is by artificially not condensing them, but sort of breaking them up in a way that like they could have made. Again, I don't know what the run times for the rest of the episodes are, but let's assume they're all like 30 to 35 minutes, maybe with the finale being a bit longer or something. I don't know. It kind of feels like maybe 6 like 50-minute episodes or something like that would have been a better way to break it down. Obviously you have to write it for 6 chapters and have like cliffhangers and so on and themes that go through an episode that make sense. But that's kind of the weird thing, is that some of the other Disney Plus shows, mostly Marvel, I've tried a couple of Star Wars shows as well, and felt very similar things, but I do kind of they feel very non-TV show, and I do mean that as like a negative. Like I want them. It's not that I don't want them to look, because obviously they're shot very cinematically. Bit over reliance on green screen and things like that for me. It's become very common practice with Marvel shows and movies to. But this is maybe accelerated a bit by the pandemic and like trying to not shoot on locations with people around, but things that could be shot on just a street, or all of a sudden, no, we'll just do it on a soundstage and a green screen or a blue screen, and we'll put the street in behind them, and like it does have a feeling to it, even if technically it's seamless at times. There is like an overall feeling to it looking artificial, and I didn't feel it too bad in this episode, and part of that is probably because for a lot of the episode it's two CGI characters, so at that point, who gives a shit? The whole thing feels a bit artificial at that point, but I will probably check out the next episode. I may review it, especially since at this point it kind of feels like it will be the real test of what the show is in episode 2, because episode 1 didn't really give us that, which probably means they should have put out the first 2, I would think. They probably should have. They should probably have treated this as a double premiere and give us like a real taste of like what the show was going to be. But they want to have it last for 9 weeks, and I can appreciate that. But because I do prefer weekly, but I want a full chapter that feels like a full meal every week. So it's and that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a serious prestige show. I mean, as much as Better Call Saul, ended this week, and I'm not going to do the injustice of comparing it to that, because that is cruel, and very few shows will live up to that. But even like a fun network show, like Chuck, right? Just as an example, Chuck's a light-hearted network show where the episode's only told about 41 minutes. Each episode of that felt like an episode. It felt like a full thing that added to the overall story, and was a lighthearted time, but it felt more fulfilling as a episode of TV on a weekly basis because of that. And I still don't think these Disney Plus shows have really accomplished that. But I don't want to sound too negative on this particular episode, though, because I do think there is some potential and promise in it, more so than I felt with like Moon Knight, which I never went back and watched any more of. I've only seen the first episode of Moon Knight, and I actually appreciated a lot of the concepts that were in that, but I still kind of found it a bit of a dull viewing experience overall. This had a bit more fire in it, but I don't know if it'll wrinkle out the problems, or iron out the problems, I should say, that a lot of these shows have had. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm definitely going to look at the next episode, and if I feel like there's enough to talk about, I'll come back and share some thoughts next week. And if I do watch the rest of it, maybe I don't know. I mean, I won't say I definitely won't review it week to week, but if I do watch all of it, I'll come back and at least share my thoughts on the season when it's done. But that said, though, if this review gets tons of views and whatever, the tons of views and comments that aren't just all you hate Marvel, then fair enough. I'll probably be more motivated from a YouTube perspective to keep watching it and talking about it. But that is the first episode of She-Hulk, Attorney at Law. So by all means, let me know what you thought of the first episode in the comments below. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, all that stuff. You can get me on the Twitters at mail_fuzz for channel updates. And if you want to support the show, head over to patreon.com/mailfuzztv, and you can support us on a monthly basis over there, or you can hit the super thanks button on YouTube for a one-time donation if you want to help keep all the content coming. Any and all support is appreciated, and that includes the ones that are just clicking on the buttons and sharing us out and things like that. All of it is appreciated. So thank you very much for joining me. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?